but this guy just like goes over the Beyond the Ice Wall map, like the lore that the people who actually made the map that I talk about on my TikTok all the time. Like it's part of like a fictional world building project from these people on Reddit. That's what the map is from. So this guy goes through like everything they wrote down about the map, and it's pretty interesting. But like I saw the first part, but I don't think I saw the rest of this. I think I only watched halfway.
Hello, welcome back to the series where I go over the lore of all the things that conspire beyond the Antarctic ice wall. This is part 2 of 3 of this entire series. So I guess now that it's episode 2, it's finally a series. But in this installment today, I will be going over everything about the second planet beyond the ice wall, known as Akupara. I'll be talking about its continents, its lore, its entities, its creatures, its history, its religion, its psychedelic effects, and every single thing that comes along with it. Akupara is 6...
By the way, the people who made this map, they like absolutely hate me because I made tons of videos with this map and I got a bunch of views on TikTok, and I didn't like point out in every single video that this specific map is part of like a fictional project. And like so they took like they actually called like TikTok and they forced them to take down a bunch of my videos.
To 7 times the size of Earth and 3 to 4 times the size of last video's planet, Atlas. So you know you're going to be in for a crazy one today. It's full of its own slew of oddities, giants, esoteric creatures, ghosts and goblins, nomads, human dragon hybrids, flying people. It's literally gonna get crazy. If you missed part 1, I will link it in the description below, but that's where I went over the first planet and world beyond the ice wall, known as Atlas. What I'm talking about today is the final planet in this 3-planet structure, Akupara. If you clicked on this video for part 2, I'm going to assume that you know the basics of the world beyond the ice wall, because this video would make no sense if you didn't. So if you want a crash course on that, please go watch the beginning of part 1. I don't want to get too long of an intro here. Y'all were complaining about it. You all have TikTok brain though. Without any more blabbering, any more introduction, let's get into the bizarre world, land, creatures, and entities beyond the second ice wall and explore Akupara. So to begin, I want to go over Akupara as an entire planet, explain how big it is, how many continents there are, and what you might expect before we get into those lands and creatures. Now again, if you do have TikTok brain, skip to the part where I go over the creatures and lore. This is just going to be a 2 to 3 minute introduction to Akupara itself, which you need to know so you can understand why it is the way it is. As you know, in this entire world beyond the ice wall theory, the planet that we know, Earth, is not actually alone. It is on top of a 3-planetoid snowman structure called Gaia. Earth sits on top, Atlas sits in the middle, and on the very bottom, this gargantuan oval-shaped planet is Akupara, what we're talking about today. And as I said in the intro, Akupara is 6 to 7 times bigger than Earth, which means even a continent that looks small here is going to be bigger than almost all of ours on Earth. Akupara can be accessed via several entries through something called the Montane Ring, which is kind of like the ice wall of Atlas. You see, because to get to Atlas from Earth, you have to cross through our Antarctic ice wall. But to get to Akupara from Atlas, you have to cross through this very treacherous ring full of mountains and canyons called the Montane Ring. Now, in the Montane Ring, there are several different lands and peoples and lore, but I will be explaining that part in the final, which is part 3, next episode. This specific episode is just about the lands and creatures and everything else of inside Akupara, which means that part 3, the next part, I will be going over the outer wastes, Hyperborea, Asgard, as well as the lore and the creatures and the lands inside the Montane Ring. So if you want a part 3, you want to hear all that, leave a like. That'll be the final part. But anyways, the name Akupara actually has some real-life implications, because in Hindu mythology, Akupara translates to the turtle that holds the world, or the world-bearing turtle. And in depictions of Akupara as it relates to the Hindu religion, you can see that this giant turtle is holding the world on its back, just like how Akupara in The World Beyond the Ice Wall.
You see, so the Earth actually is round, but it's also connected to like a snowman-shaped other balls. Or I don't know, it's just on top of other balls.
Is holding up Atlas and Earth. Akupara is far more mysterious and esoteric and magical than Atlas and Earth combined. If you remember in the very first part, I talked about a substance called ether, which you all corrected me over and over again. It is not pronounced aether, it is pronounced ether. I'm sorry, but the A shouldn't be there. But if you recall, ether is denser at higher elevations, meaning up on Earth here on top of the snowman, there's more of it. Atlas, there's a little bit less, but by the time you get past the montane ring to Akupara, nothing makes sense. The magic that's kind of subdued in Earth and on Atlas is not subdued here. It is free-flowing to everybody. There's an estimated 6 billion people that are living in Akupara, which might not seem like a lot, but actually, most of the lands aren't even fully discovered yet.
6 billion? That's not very much. If it's supposed to be like 6 to 7 times the size of Earth.
Because the planet is just so big, and half of them aren't even explored. So we don't know if that's true or not. Throughout this video, you will notice a massive influx and spike in esoteric and ethereal beings. Creatures from the underworld, godlike entities, sentient mammals and birds and plants, and things that just generally are actually wild. The landscapes here are even greater and older and more ancient. Everything is primordial, almost. And this is because Akupara was the first of the 3 globes to form, so it is by far the most ancient, by far the oldest. And people estimate that it formed itself over 4 billion years ago. So essentially, if you watched part 1 and you thought like magic little gnomes and goblins and blimiers were crazy and weird, and you thought the lore there was weird, you're in for a treat with this one, because Akupara makes that seem like it's all normal. Akupara also has a much higher biodiversity rate with its flora and its fauna. Its climates and its continents are grander and more different, and a lot of the stuff you're about to hear you really can't even comprehend. But I'll do my best. So pretty much that was the basic overview of Akupara. It is a massive behemoth planet full of massive behemoth things. Magic, spells, cosmetology, the ethereal plane, it's all here. And the creatures, the lands, the lore, the history matches that. Very little is actually documented about this planet, and that's because very few earthly explorers can even make it here. I mean, they're lucky enough to get to Atlas, much less the planet beyond it. So there will be a couple continents that don't really have much lore, but I have asked the creator of the map and several other lore contributors, and they've given me some lore to fill you in on. But with that groundwork settled, let's get into the creatures, the lands, the lore, and all that sweet stuff of Akupara.
We're at 7 minutes.
So as of this video, Akupara has 66 named landmasses. Now for reference, the entire planet of Atlas had 59 named landmasses, and Atlas was fully explored pretty much. Akupara is not. The first continent for the video is known as Abraxas, also known as the Glowing Isles. Now this landmass is located across the
I've never heard anything about this place. All I ever heard about was
mountain ring from Aten. If you remember Aten from Atlas, this is kind of across the ring, directly
I don't remember anything about this at all.
Away from it. The lands of Abraxas are constantly lit and illuminated from itself. Everything here glows, everything sparkles, and everything has this magical effervescence. The air and the plant life here is temperate and moderate, and it sits in kind of a tropical environment. It's located in the Calamicious Ocean, and like I said, this is one of those islands that doesn't have too much lore about it, but what we do know is that it glows. Now, Abraxas sits in the Calamissious Ocean, and you'll notice that here in Akupara, there are many more oceans and bodies of waters than there were in Atlas. On the southeastern point of Abraxas, a kingdom with peoples called the Red Israelites reside. There's this massive capital city there where the ruler of these people lives, and he's known as the Red King. Now, Abraxas as a continent is home to a very precious material known as shamir. And this material is known to be able to cut through almost anything. It's this thick, red, glowy substance, and it's highly sought after. And these Red Israelites, they've essentially monopolized the production, sale, and gathering of this material, and that's how they...
Everyone's got like a secret material wherever their country is.
Became rich. It's kind of similar to refined metal. It could also be akin to like Valyrian steel from Game of Thrones, if you know what that is. But the Red Israelites have a monopoly on mining it, and therefore they have sold this material to everybody else at a high price to get rich. Kind of like America with oil. But that's all on the south part of Abraxas. The north part is kind of like plains lands and mountainous regions, and in these areas, entities known as monopods live and roam. Now, monopods are like a devolved, mangled humanoid. They have one large leg and one large foot on the tail end of it, and they kind of just hop around on that foot. Their bodies are small and malnourished, and their heads are also small. Now, if you remember from part 1, our old pal Sfath created the Blimier population, those giant creatures with the eyes on their chests. He might have had a hand or two in creating the monopods as well. So you're going to hear more about that later. Moving down to the next landmass for today, we have U, which is just U with 2 dots over it. This is a much smaller landmass than Abraxas, and U is pretty much only inhabited by the monopods that I just described. Monopods are pretty peaceful and temperate, but they will attack if threatened, and they do roam the entire island. Other than this, the lands of U are pretty much just tropical and rainforest filled. Not much is known about them. Chia is next, and it's spelled X-I-A, but I think it's pronounced Chia, so just bear with me. This place is known as the Palace of the Jade Dragons. The continent itself is massive. It is very expansive. It's bigger than Abraxas, bigger than you combined. The people who live here in Chia are from the Garden Isles. They're kind of like transplants because they had to leave due to wars and stuff. Chia is a land of temperate and calm lakes and rivers and rolling hills. In the southern regions, that's how it is, but in the northern regions, there are deserts and highlands and dangerous places like that. Chia is also home to the original Chinese people that we know on Earth. In this lore system, people from Chia are the ancestors and descendants both of the original Chinese people. Now, as I said, the subname of Chia is the Palace of the Jade Dragons, and that's because of a single individual known as the Jade Emperor. Now, the Jade Emperor is a very powerful being who is not human. In fact, he is only one of 6 surviving members of a race called the Sumanites. Now, the Sumanites in this lore system were an ancient race of sentient, mammal-like lizard creatures. They had societies that...
like Wikipedia page about all this, like every single continent, like going down, like every island and every like country in there, they have a Wikipedia page for it. Like, they don't have everything like written out, but they got this whole page set up. It's gonna have so much stuff, and maybe I could like cover it, but I don't know. Like, the creators of the map already hate me, so I don't even know if I should even do that. Maybe I should just go over there and see what's actually over there, if there is an ice wall.
That were far more advanced than any human society ever was, but they almost all died out during the Great Dying that occurred millions of years ago. After this Great Dying, they were scattered from Earth to Atlas to Akupara, and they kind of set up camp wherever they could. Their societies were driven by pleasure and carnal desire. They didn't really have religion, they didn't have a greater purpose. They kind of just became so advanced that they gave into their own whimsy and their own carnal stuff. Anyways, this Jade Emperor is one of those creatures. He's one of the most powerful ones ever. Like I said, he's one of the 6 of those rulers. And he came to Chia and created this giant palace and these huge towers and walls, and he rules over the city to this day. Chia is steeped in mythos and legend in Akupara, and it's very widely known for its fame. It's got too much lore, can't cover it all, but what I gave you are the cliff notes. Thanks. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Moving even further south and at the speed of the Flash, we have Azania, also known as the Kingdom of Prestor John. Again, get your lore caps on. It's about to get wild. Azania is a long and skinny continent that kind of resembles the shape of Florida, or Italy almost. Long and thick rivers cut through the expanses and almost connect ocean to ocean. But the interesting part of Azania is not its rivers, and it's not its proximity to how it looks close to Italy. It's actually the name it's been given, the land of Prestor John. A race of people known as the Nubians live here in this land, and they have their own lore in and of themselves. But Prestor John has some interesting history on Earth, because in the medieval chronicles that we abide by, Prestor
Is that supposed to be a real person? Prestor John?
John was mentioned as this Christian ruler who dwelt and ruled and kind of was the king of these marvelous faraway lands. He ruled over strange lands with miraculous mythical beasts and dragons and half-human hybrids.
Let me look this up. Prestor John. Oh, so he is an actual person that this is based off of. Mythical. Okay.
Mythical creatures like sirens and harpies flew in the skies, and Prestor John
I wish I had this right here. It's like the Key and Peele skit. He's like, I'm gonna drag these nuts on your chin. He's literally got him on his chin.
mythical creatures like sirens and harpies flew in the skies, and Prestor John kind of oversaw it all. And the lands here on Azania are called the Kingdom of Prestor John because of that. That's how these lands are. They're wild, they're untamed. Creatures with multiple eyes and multiple limbs, and giant lion-human hybrids. Harpies that fly in the sky, Nubians that live here too. Everything seems mythical. Azania sits on top of what is known as the
This could be a crazy movie idea. And like they could do this because all the movies now, they're gonna like start switching to putting memes in the movies, and the ice wall and Agartha and like all this stuff is already a huge meme. And so like with the Minecraft movie, like that entire movie was a meme. So if they just like made one for the ice wall and like had all this stuff in it, like it would be huge on TikTok. I think they would make a lot of money. That's why I wanted to do that. So I tried doing it with AI, but the AI technology just isn't there yet. And I can't like, you need a ton of special effects, and I don't have like $150 million to do that.
Carousel Ocean, which is kind of this area where there's a bunch of different land masses that are all in a circle. And it really sounds like it's fun to go to. I'd visit. So thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. You know, it's finally
Let me skip this.
New Cahokia are the descendants of the American Indian tribes known as the Cahokians. The
Because all these continents are like people who sailed from like each of these different regions on Earth. That's why they like, that's like their lore behind it. Like all these people sailed over there and they all found like their own continent and they brought their people there.
Cahokian tribe from North America settled in the Missouri area near St. Louis, and they were known for having this gigantic city. It was a mega city that had never really been seen before, and when it was discovered, it was kind of just in mounds and ruins. The Cahokians eventually sailed through the ice wall, sailed through the Montane Ring, and they ended up here in New Cahokia to settle these fertile, rainforesty lands. Newitt is next, and it's called Heaven's Gate, which I'm pretty sure that's a cult, but I digress. It is an incredibly small island off of the coast of Iwas, and there's really not much labeled about it. There is a giant pyramid in the center of the island though, and worshippers of strange deities go there, apparently.
This could all be real too. It could turn out that like there really is an ice wall and all these continents out there. Like it could be real.
Legends of winged creatures fly around Nuit, and other beasts that seem like they're right out of Revelations in the Bible. Sorry, it's Revelation. In Earth's history, Nuit is the goddess of the space and the heavens in Egyptian mythology, so that's undoubtedly where this name came from. Much of Akupara and its names and its lore revolves around Norse, Egyptian, and American Indian style mythos and legends and lore, and you'll see that as we go on. Iwas, or Iwas, is next, and I think that's how you pronounce it. Iwas is often nicknamed as the levitating continent because it does just that. This massive landmass literally floats around the eastern portions
I never noticed this before, but the borders don't have like that light color around it like these do, so I guess the whole time like this is supposed to be like a continent in the air.
Akupara. It is the biggest floating landmass in all of the entire Gaia planetary body. Nothing even comes close to it. And it's never been set foot on or touched by a human. Many people say that Iwas is hundreds of billions of years old. It is an ancient, religious, esoteric place. And everything that goes on there is really unknown and enigmatic because you can't see it. The only place where you can even kind of look over at it is if you go to the pyramid in the middle of Nuit and climb to the very top of that pyramid. You can kind of see over the floating continent. But even then, no human's ever been there, so we don't know what goes on. All that we do know is that Iwas seems to be evolved in some way, like greater versions of people live there. Strange flying beasts and griffins and angels roam the air. But again, no one's even set foot there, so we don't know if that's true. Over to the left is the continent of Minerva, also known as Croatoan. Now, Minerva is a very interesting land because, again, it is full of a bunch of descendants of Native American tribes. If you've ever heard of the lost colony of Roanoke from real life or the story and legend that it is, you probably heard of the word Croatoan. If you've ever been to the Outer Banks in real life, the highway that runs through it is called the Croatoan Highway as well. You're real if you know that one, by the way. I'm sure you've heard of the legend of Roanoke and the missing colony, but essentially, an entire colony went missing after the guys who were running it left for 2 years. They came back, all they found was carved into a tree on the outside of the place, the word Croatoan, which is an Indian band of people, but they were never seen again, and their families were never seen again either. Somehow those peoples got here to Minerva in Akupara, and don't ask me how, but they did, and the remnants and remains of the Croatoan tribe is here. And finally, completing the Carousel Ocean is the continent of Micronesia, the land of the sandstone towers. The continent, as its name suggests, is very dry, very arid, and full of sand and sandstone. Along its eastern coast, it's almost like a desert biome from Minecraft. Giant sandy temples are dotted there. Sand traps, quicksand, sandy mountains, sandy caverns, it's all sand. But on the other side, the west side, rich forests dot the landscape. At this point in the video, we've gone over about 1/4 of all the land masses in Akupara. It's all sand. But on the other side, the west side, rich...
Where is this photo even from? Is that even possible to have like a desert right next to like a rainforest?
Forests dot the landscape. At this point in the video, we've gone over about 1/4 of all the land masses in Akupara. Buckle in, you're doing great. I hope your brain hasn't exploded yet. At this point, we're at a place called the Circumscribed Ocean, and in this ocean, gigantic krakens are said to be. Strange fish-human hybrids have also been seen and reported, and you do not want to sail in these waters unless you absolutely have to. Beyond the circumscribed ocean, though, is 2 continents known as Weldrum and Polybius. Both of these continents are jam-packed with their own lore and mythos. Take a shot every time I say lore in this video. And the 2 continents are actually nearly connected by a series of archipelagos that almost reach each other from their coasts. Polybius is known as the Psychonauts Oasis, which is a crazy name that goes kind of hard. The word psychonaut refers to the altered state of consciousness that humans attempt and try to reach by doing deep meditation or taking something. Some sort of substance that makes you trip, pretty much. And as such, the land...
I've never done that before, believe it or not.
And here at Polybius, the psychonaut...
Many people think I did because I have so many crazy ideas, but nope, I never have.
Oasis is just like that. Everything is like a gigantic trip. Everything's colorful. Large plants emit glowing texture. There's swirls in the sky. The land itself is almost a drug. Colorful creatures with billions of wings and eyeballs float around the skies. Magic is very prevalent here, and spells pretty much exist in the open. Entities of the ethereal realm walk freely here. Angels and demons and gods and deities literally just walk around. The land itself is warped and glitchy, and the sky is colorful and non-real. Flying creatures can just walk right through solid objects, and it literally seems like you are tripping on the craziest trip of your life. Nothing makes sense, yet at the same time, everything makes sense. On the left side of Polybius is the Scorched Wastes, which again is a crazy place that I'll explain in part 3 when I explain all the wastes. Veldrum, or Weldrum,
I'm gonna have to give this a like,
is nicknamed Destiny Manifest, and this is that sister continent that is nearly connected to Polybius. Now, Weldrum is very interesting because it was colonized and kind of found by a group of people that I've already talked about. If you remember the giant continent of Aten that I mentioned last video, then you will remember its inhabitants, goblins, orcs, gnomes, hobgoblins, and things like that, were all that roamed the expanses. And the reason all of the creatures in Aten were kind of short and stumpy is because there wasn't enough natural resources to make them grow fully.
Right.
So over time, their body
happens to people in our world too.
He's kind of developed the ability to not grow. However, these goblins and a group of these orcs and gnomes and stuff eventually left Aten and sailed all the way through the Montane Ring and found Veldrum. They settled it, they colonized it, and they began to grow.
Those Duende guys are real. I've seen videos, and they're like over in Mexico. Of just these like people that are like 6 inches tall. I think they gotta be real. There's too many stories like all around of people seeing those too.
Weldrum is a world and a continent that is massively rich in nutrients. The trees here are huge. They bear fruits and vegetables. The grass is plentiful. The wheat is plentiful. And these small people from Aten found this place and they grew. And they grew and they grew and they grew and they grew even more. And now they are giants. That's right. The people that were short and goblins from Aten came here, and now their descendants are gargantuan behemoths.
Very cool.
The name Weldrum itself actually directly translates to the land of trolls, which is exactly what it is. Across the expanse of Weldrum, these giants roam, and they live amongst the huge trees, the caverns, and chasms.
Maybe that's what happened to the Duendes in Mexico. They went all the way to Africa, into like Saudi Arabia or wherever like there's that rumor conspiracy where there's the red-haired giant in the cave. That was like huge on TikTok last year, and like people say that that's the reason why America went to the Middle East in like the 90s and early 2000s, is because they're hunting down a giant. Maybe it was a duende at one point from Mexico. Who knows?
It's literally the perfect place to grow a civilization. Good job, gnomes. Below the continents that I just mentioned, there's literally none for thousands of miles. It's just ocean. Specifically, this huge ocean expanse is called the Archipelago Ocean, and that's because it's an ocean full of little archipelagos. Got it? None of these land masses here have anything about them. I don't know the lore about them, but they're little tiny islands. So do with that what you will. Moving around to the bottom of the map, we have the land of Scylla and Charybdis, home of the Harpies. This is when that awesome mythology comes into play. Strap in for this. The names Scylla and Charybdis might sound familiar to you if you know Greek legend and mythology, because both of these beasts are from the mythos there. Scylla is kind of like a half lizard, half woman creature that hides on the one side of a body of water. And Charybdis is this other giant creature that creates whirlpools with its mouth.
What do you say?
With thousands of rows of teeth. If you've seen Percy Jackson, you've seen something similar to Charybdis. Scylla has dog heads sprouting from her body and a strange human top with a lizard back. And Charybdis is just an eldritch horror. So, essentially, the entire tale of Scylla and Charybdis is in the Odyssey, and it symbolizes being between a rock and a hard spot, because they have to sail through the lands of Scylla and Charybdis, where they're kind of in between. And that's exactly what these two sister islands or sister continents are. The continent itself is very mountainous, very airy, kind of high in elevation, and the things that live.
You could make like 20 movies out of this lore. Maybe I'll have to steal the lore. Just kidding, I won't do that.
Live here are harpies. Harpies are creatures with the bodies of birds, but with the head and neck of a human. So they have wings and they have multiple feet and stuff, but they have the head and kind of the shoulders of a human. These harpies live up in these high mountains, in these caves, and in these caverns, flying back and forth to the rivers below to catch their food. Below Scylla and Charybdis is the Draconic Isles, which, if you know what Draconic means, you know, again, this is a dangerous place. Like the name suggests, this island cluster is a hot, fiery, magma-filled place full of dragon layers. Huge fireworms and bloodworms and serpents and wyverns and...
Better bring a 5G cell tower with me if I ever go here.
Dragons, as we know them, fly around the expanses and live in the volcanic ash. Active volcanoes constantly erupt and smoke here, and fire naturally comes from the ground. This place is also home to some kind of living fire, which moves around like a beast, but acts like fire. Not much is known about the Draconic Isles, but what is known is that no human should ever set foot there if they want to make it out alive and don't want to get eaten by a fireworm. Over to the right is another interesting place known as Glarnia, the Lost World.
Glarnia, yes.
This is a huge continent, one of the biggest in all of Akupara, and it's been made famous due to the almost storybook aspect of it. It is a prehistoric nightmare with giant expanses where human and animal hybrids run free. Gargantuan snakes and beasts of the field with wings. The lands here are lush with vegetation and forests, and mist rolls over all of them. It's a very, very princessy type place. Huge ancient castle ruins are here as well, and if you've ever seen the movie or read the book Narnia, this is essentially what it's like. The creatures here can be sentient, and they can speak, and they can connect with people. And as such, human and animal hybrids are a pretty common thing. Above Glarnia is Aurora, the Mountains of Kong, Lalam, and...
It's where Donkey Kong is from over here. People forget about this place, it's so small.
Siwa Sigwo. No written lore is available about those places I just mentioned. They're kind of unfamiliar to people and travelers. The only information we can gather is from their names and their nicknames, their sub-names. So Aurora is titled the Audience of Lights, so I'm assuming that the sky opens up to the Aurora Borealis, kind of like it does in the north.
That doesn't make any sense because this can only exist at a magnetic pole. Either the North Pole or the South Pole. And this is actually a portal to Agartha.
Northern areas of the world. The Mountains of Kong, I don't know what that means. Does King Kong live there? Who knows? I don't have an idea. And Lala, or Lale, or Layla, is the land of slumbering giants. So that's cool. Maybe there's giants there. And Siwasigyo is titled the home of the Flaming Emperor. So that's all we know. A lot of the lands in Akupara are just kind of known in legend. They haven't really been fully mapped out, because why would you? You'd probably die if you tried. At this point, we're pretty much halfway done through the entire world. We're making good progress. Let's keep going. And it's also at this point when the continents and the lands and the islands will begin to have scant lore, where not much is documented about them, not much is researched about them, and all that we know are kind of whispered wives' tales of
Yeah, we don't know much about it, so we should just go there and find out, right?
what goes on. Now, if you're looking at this map right here, you might think that I'm going to go over Atlantis next, because it's kind of the next thing, but Atlantis is connected to the Wastelands, and I will not be going over the Wastelands until part 3, the next part, the final issue of this series. Continuing along upwards, we have New Taurid, aka Gone with the Wind. So, Taurid itself in the World Beyond the Ice Wall doesn't really have any written lore. There's no page about it, there's no documentation, but it's referencing something that happened in real life. And this is a mystery in and of itself, and it might be a future video of mine. This comes from an urban legend / possibly real story from real life called The Man from Taurid. The story goes like this. A man named John
I've talked about this many times on my TikTok, and people went insane for this.
Zegras was a person back in the 1960s who landed in Tokyo, Japan, and was a white Caucasian. He got off the plane, they were asking where he was from and where he's headed, and he said that he was from a place between Spain and France called Torrid. Except if you know anything about geography, that doesn't exist. The Japanese officials were pretty confused when he said he was from this place. Then he proceeds to pull out a passport that said he was from Torrid, and he opened up the passport book, and lo and behold,
I don't think that's the actual photo of the passport. I don't think they even have it.
Places had stamped approval and accepted the passport, almost as if it was proving that Torrid was a real place. The Japanese officials then went to go get a map and show this guy that Torrid isn't a real place, and they opened the map up and they pointed to Andorra, which is the only place between Spain and France, and the guy got offended, got angry at them. He thought they were playing a practical joke on him by saying that his home country didn't exist. He got kind of aggressive, and then eventually the Japanese officers that were at the airport there kind of agreed to take him under protective custody, kind of take him to this hotel, keep him monitored, and just see what's going on. All of that's good and well until the next morning, they went to his room and he was gone. And every single piece of evidence that he was there was also gone.
Yeah, he went to a different dimension. Or he went through a portal that took him past the ice wall.
His bags, his clothing, his passport vanished from the room, which was under guard. Some people believe this man was a time traveler, and he was from some era when Torrid existed. Some people believe he slipped into an alternate dimension where Torrid was Andorra. But what if none of that's correct? What if Torrid was real? It just exists only in Akupara. And this is where it exists over here. New Torrid. I like that theory. It sounds pretty cool. Moving up and around, we have Lucinesia, Iconographa, and the Ascending Isles, as well as Sprinesia. No written lore exists about these places. Once again, no one would dare come here because why would you risk your life for a place called Sprinesia? The next big landmass of note is known as Horus. Horus is known as the Great Pillar of Akupara, and that's because it is a very ancient land that is thought to be one of the first ones, besides the floating island from earlier, to be formed here. It is a massive continent with a humongous lake in the middle of it. It's surrounded by tons and tons of little small island chains around it, like the Cup of Poseidon, Pantopica, Begel, and the Garden Isles, as well as the Inunaki Islands. Just a ton of different chains. All of these places...
How have I never seen this before? The Inunaki Islands. Maybe they misspelt it, or it's just supposed to be something different.
And the borders of Horus are very tropical, very lush, and it's kind of like the Caribbean. Horus is an ancient land where strange humanoids walk around, and people don't really want to explore because of how ancient and old and prophetic it is. Moving along from Horus, way down out of the way, is the Isle of Man, also known as the Castaway Island. Few have literally ever dared
Never even seen that one either.
to sail to the Castaway Island, because why would you? It's called the Castaway Island, and it's in the middle of the Sea of Shadows and the Abysmal Ocean. Why would you want to go there? The only lore we have about it is that the Isle of Man is also a real island from Earth. That's all I know, though. Now we're entering the region and the general area of the great continent of Amun-Ra, the stronghold of the Nephilim. Around Amun-Ra, there are thousands of islands and archipelagos and chains like this. Telenesia, Heterotopia, Singularis.
Teslanesia. That's where Nikola Tesla went. He disappeared over here, and this is where he continued his research.
The Comatose Coast. There's tons of different places to explore around this gigantic continent. Now, obviously, the name Amun-Ra itself comes from the Egyptian folklore and histories. Amun-Ra is a very famous, very notable god in their religion, and it's kind of this fusion between the sun and death and life. So this place, this Amun-Ra continent, is teeming with life. The sun is bright, the plants are huge, and as its subtitle says, it is the foreground of the Nephilim, which of course is a reference to the Bible. The Nephilim are the children that angels had with earthly women.
I'm actually part Nephilim, if anyone knew that.
These are said to be large, giant creatures with ethereal power almost, and they roam the lands of Amun-Ra. There's colonies of them here, and that would explain where they went from real life, because they're not here. Comatose Coast is a place that puts you to sleep. Its vibrations and its ecosystem relax you down and almost put you into a lower part of sentience. Teslanesia, which I think I called Telenesia earlier, I apologize, it's known for its electric currents that run through the ground and the beings here. Heterotopia is known as the lands of defiance, and that's for good reason. Heterotopic places in
straight people?
Real life is a term used to describe cultural spots of disturbing or intense magnitude. Things that are incompatible with human social stuff, but yet they're there, like insane asylums, prisons, brothels, that sort of thing. The old saying goes is that in a utopia, everything is good. In a dystopia, everything is bad. But in a heterotopia, everything is weird and different. So just by the name of this island, you can tell how strange things are here. Winged lions and fish that can talk, and everything is just against reality here. Moving up and around further to the continent of Terra Nova, the New Earth. It's also known as the legacy of the Suminians. So again, I touched on it earlier, but the Suminians, or the Suminites, or whatever you want to call them, are kind of this ancient sentient being that took the appearance of a mammal, lizard, reptile thing, but they were able to create culture and society, and they were greater than human societies. They were the most advanced civilization before the Great Dying occurred. Then, like I said earlier, once that happened, they got scattered everywhere. A lot of these Suminites came to Terra Nova, and they built it up. Now the ancient ruins of their cathedrals and their buildings and everything else is just here. And it's one of the last strongholds of the Suminian culture. Moving directly north is the continent of Eden, which, yes, that is the Eden from the Bible, the Garden of Eden. So in Earth's lore, the Garden of Eden is where life began. It's where God put Adam and Eve to live there, where there was no sin, no strife, and no turmoil. Eden was a lush and beautiful
place. Yeah, we could just sail over here. It's a boat trip away.
Place with plants and animals and rivers and streams and mist. And this continent is no different. Eden in Akupara is just that. It's kind of a vestige of what once the Garden of Eden was. Above Eden is the tiny island nation of the Oikosa, or the psychic melting pot. Just like many of the lands here, you can enter a state of psychosis and kind of enter the different dimension, the fourth dimension, because there's not enough ether to keep things normal. And that's especially the truth on this island. Warlocks and magicians and magics and studiers of the dark arts, you could say, come to this island. At this point, we reach another set of oceans where there's no lands of importance. This is where the Timorous Ocean and the Thousand Land Sea resides. Again, these waters are dotted with tales of sirens and gigantic flying whales and strange sea creatures that will eat entire ships. Atop the glacial oceans is the home of Formosa Ultima, the land of the broken moon. Now, the Formosa people are actually a colony on Earth that once inhabited a small region of Taiwan in the late 1800s. Other than that connection, I can't find any other lore about this area, other than that really cool name, the Land of the Broken Moon. That's pretty fire. Also, guys, we're bringing it back for part 2, the Mothman hoodie. Moving up along from Formosa is the continent of Umurangi, the lands of the Red Rain. Again, no lore is listed about it, but lands of red rain could mean two things. One, it just rains red. Two, it's blood rain, and people die there all the time. Whatever the case is, we don't know much about them. Moving around yet again, we find ourselves at the continent of Greater Lemuria. This is a very interesting region of Akupara, and that is because it ties directly into Earth. And let me tell you the story. Greater Lemuria is known as the fertile graveyard as it relates to the world beyond the ice wall, but in our Earth, Lemuria was actually a proposed continent to have existed between...
This is on the ancient, or not ancient, but the German map from the... I guess it is ancient if it's from the 1940s. But it was the German flat earth map, and that showed Lemuria as an actual continent in the Indian Ocean.
Madagascar and India. A man by the name of Philip Scatler came up with the theory that a place called Lemuria, a continent, a land bridge, if you will, once connected the island of Madagascar to the southern tip of the subcontinent of India. And he came
So it's part of Madagascar. Wow.
up with this theory because there were lemur bones and lemur skeletons in that southern tip of India that matched directly to lemur bones and skeletons from Madagascar. The only problem is, how'd the lemur bones get there if there's an entire ocean separating them? So he came up with the idea that there once was a great continent called Lemuria that connected the two.
Yeah, there probably was. I think there was. I think like in all these oceans, the sea level is constantly changing, and we see continents come in and out over like thousands of years.
However, later on in the 19th century, the theory of continental drift became widely accepted, and the belief in Lemuria disappeared, much like it was said to itself. But what if Lemuria did in fact exist, and it did drift just all the way through the ice wall and over to Akupara? That's what this theory says in the Beyond the Ice Wall lore. Greater Lemuria and Lemuria itself here in Akupara are full of biodiverse flora and fauna. Societies of mammals and reptiles and hominids and other sapient creatures all inhabit the hills. The remnants of some of the Sumanites live here as well. It also borders the wastes on one side. Lemuria is pretty cool. Maybe it was real, maybe it just ended up past the ice wall, who knows. On the northwestern tip of Greater Lemuria, in a little cove, lies an island nation known only as Patmos. Patmos is also, and more widely known as, the Fortress of Yakub. Okay, again, for the 15th time this video, the lore is about to get crazy. Don't click off yet. Put your tinfoil hat on. Let's talk about Yakub. So Yakub...
I always hear about this guy, Yakub, but I don't know anything about him. He's supposed to be like relating to Gartha. I see him in all the Gartha memes on TikTok.
Yakub is a form or a derivative variant of the name Jacob from the Bible. If you know anything about biblical history, Jacob was the father of the tribes of Israel. But Yakub in this rite relates to the religion and the belief system of the NOI, the Nation of Islam. According to the NOI, now stay with me here, Yakub was a black scientist who lived about 6,600 years ago.
What happened to his head?
And he actually created white people. They believe that only black people existed before Yakub created white people. Now, why did he create?
I did hear that, but I thought it was Satan that made white people.
The white race, you might ask yourself. Let's see what the NOI has to say. It was said in the lore of the NOI, the actual real-life lore, that Yakub was born near Mecca, the Islamic stronghold. And he was born with this large, oversized cranium. His head was big. He kind of had like a little odd-shaped head. And because of this, the people near him bullied him, made fun of him, ostracized him, and were kind of like, ha ha ha. But the only thing is, Yakub was a genius. He was very smart for as long as anyone could remember, and he came up with this plan to get back at these bullies, to get back at these people who were kind of making fun of him. And his idea was to create a race of people that would enslave those people that were making fun of him. And according to the NOI, he left Mecca, sailed around all of Africa, and he ended up on an island off the coast of Greece called Patmos. On Patmos, he would begin his mad science experiments to create these people that would control the people who made fun of him. And eventually, he created white people. So in the Beyond the Ice Wall fandom, Yakub didn't go to Patmos by Greece, he came to Patmos in Akupara. And he created and did a bunch of like biology experiments and created other genes and other kind of hybrids. He didn't create white people in this theory. They're just using like the character and the pictures and the lore from real life. But Yakub here in the Beyond the Ice Wall is still a genius, still this mega genius that dabbles in biochemistry and the creation of clones and things like that. And that's what he does here on Patmos. He came to the islands of Lemuria and created human animal hybrids, and he created new creatures. Kind of like Svath from earlier. So yeah, does that make sense? No? Me neither. Moving along at a rapid-fire pace, we find ourselves at the continent.
Could be possible. Maybe there was someone who was born with a giant brain, and they did a bunch of experiments to create different types of people. Like they just did make they brought the dire wolf back somehow. So maybe there was someone thousands of years ago that made a different kind of human. But I don't think it's true. I don't think I was made in a lab.
Of Asclepia, the living hospital. Now, this is a nation of islands along these archipelagos in the ocean of destiny. Yet another ocean. The name, the living hospital, implies that the land itself is healing. It almost nurtures and cares and cures ailments just by you being there. Below that is Doveland, which is God's blind spot, that's its nickname, and Doveland has a pretty interesting lore that relates to real life as well. There's very little lore about Doveland from here in the ice wall, but real life Doveland was apparently a city in Wisconsin that never actually existed, yet thousands of people believe that it did. People would swear up and down that they'd been there before, that they'd driven through it, that they had shirts and coffee cups from there. But when push came to shove, it never was real. Maybe it was nowhere to be seen because it was in Akupara, and it got transported out of our country by Hyperborea to get here. Above Doveland is the New Caribia, or also the Embassies of Akupara.
Okay.
Now, sadly, no lore exists about these places, but it's called the Embassies of Akupara, so I'm assuming there's some kind of governing entities or higher level consciousness people, gods, deities, that kind of thing, that live here and kind of pull the strings of what happens. I don't know, that could be wrong. Now we find ourselves in the Yakaruna Sea Forest, which is a very intriguing place, unlike anything I've seen. It is an island nation surrounded by shallow water, but in the water, trees, animals, and other plants have adapted to grow underneath that water from the ground. The plant growth here is very thick. Trees sprout from the sand and grow through the salt water. Mammals walk on the ocean floor, and they can breathe
It's actually super cool. I didn't think this lore would be as cool as it actually is.
Oxygen somehow. The water here is crystal clear blue. The lands and the islands that are above water are constantly marshy and they're almost sinking, it seems, and they're just floating around, held together by the roots of the trees that grow beneath them in the water. Next, we have the continent of Oracula, or Oracula, the land of the prophets. The main quirk of this place, besides its extreme biodiversity, is the presence of high strangeness. A psychological power runs through every single living thing here. It's kind of like the land of the psychonauts from earlier, Polybius, except this is way more powerful. It is said that every conscious mind, not just humans, animals too, that set foot on this island go instantly into deja vu and dreaming. Visions of the past, visions of the future,
like
and visions of the present are constantly implemented into your brain once you get here. Again, this place is like a psychedelic trip, and somehow every single person, no matter what level of consciousness, is gifted higher reasoning and higher capabilities.
Yeah, I have that too, higher reasoning and higher capabilities.
You could just have like a dumb animal, but they're enlightened because they've seen the light. The island is...
imagine like what happened if I went there. I'd probably become like a cube, and I'd get a huge head, and then I'd create people with blue skin or something.
Also connected to the prophet Nostradamus from real-life mythos. If you don't know anything about Nostradamus, he was essentially this kind of like future teller, this prophet that would write little poems and little stuff like this in ancient France, and he disappeared for a certain few years. Some think he came here and founded this island, or found this island, and that's where he got his visions and prophecies from. Moving over through yet another ocean, called the Terminal Ocean, which, these names, man. We have the great expanse of Sequoia, the Forest of Giants. Now, you might have heard of the Sequoia National Park from real life, where the gigantic trees, ferns, rivers, and everything grow in these huge groves. Been there a couple times myself. But this is kind of like that on steroids. The entire expanse of Sequoia here is primordial. It is ancient and it is dense. No sapient life, like humans or higher evolved creatures, live here because they simply couldn't compete with the natural beasts that roam the trees. The trees here are thousands of feet tall. They're massive, they're wide, they're kind of like the Avatar trees. The beasts here are giant tiger hybrids with wolves and giant sloths and huge lemurs and monkeys. These things are like 50, 60 feet tall, and they dominate the entire expanse of Sequoia. If you zoom up on the map here, you can see just how thick the dots of trees are. It's almost impassable. And if you kind of sent a person here, everything is so big, they couldn't even do anything. Saber-toothed tigers, crossbreeds between humans and tigers, massive birds with razor-sharp talons fly through the trees. It's like you're in Ark Survival Evolved, kinda. Moving up to the very top of Akupara, we have the Sky Caverns. As of this video, the Sky Caverns don't have much documentation, frankly, but we do know what they're called by sailors and adventurers who go near them. People refer to it as
sailors and adventurers. That's me. I could go over here. I've never like heard anything about this, like this area and this whole region over here too.
As the Labyrinth of the Glidelings. And if you look here on the map, if you zoom up on it, you can see that the entirety of the Sky Caverns is a rocky, mountainous, high and arid place with massive stone structures and columns and gorges and rivers and mountain ranges that these glidelings live through. What are glidelings, you might ask? Glidelings are intelligent, flying creatures. Kind of similar to harpies, but less human. They have near the level of consciousness that humans do, but not quite. They're able to develop societies and able to live in big communities, but not reach higher levels of enlightenment like humans. Anyways, these glidelings glide through the big caverns and the huge rivers, and they catch fish, and they live in giant caves. Directly below the Sky Caverns, we have the land
I shouldn't go there. It sounds kind of dangerous.
of Anubis. And Anubis is in the middle of this sort of rocky formation, this outcropping from the Montane Ring, which again, I'll explain all the lands and civilizations and creatures of the ring in part 3, if you want that. But Anubis is called the super colony, and that's because so many creatures and people live here. Not only because of its proximity to the Montane Ring, it's easier to get to, it's also kind of safe inside of the bay. It's way easier than sailing to the Isle of Man from earlier. But this little ring here has the Indigo Caverns, named Stacia, the Canals of Akin, Shambhala, the Gates to Agartha, all of which I'll
Wait, what's going on here? The gates?
explain in my next part. And the name might sound familiar to you, and that's because Anubis is a god or a deity in Egyptian folklore. Essentially, Anubis guides people to hell, or the underworld, and he kind of controls who goes in and out, and he also has some form of control and dominion over death. It's a pretty cool name for a pretty safe place. We're down to the last 5 named land masses for this video, guys. I've been recording for like 4 hours, but we're still good to go. To the left of Anubis and the Montane Ring is a place known only as Rephigia, a calm between 2 storms. This land is kind of like this peninsula sticking out of the Montane Ring, and it's just like its sub-name describes. It is a very calm, very peaceful environment full of soft rolling hills and no creatures that want to kill you. Frankly, it's safe here. There's giant flowers and turtles and dolphins that swim around the waters. There's literally no danger to come here, and because of this, people kind of just tend to come here and stay for a while. Now, I will be saving Robinsonia, the continent of the adventurer, for when I explain the Outer Wastes and the Montane Ring. I know it's not consistent because I've done things like Umurangi and Dovland, but
I wish there was like more detail on this map where they actually showed like buildings and the type of vegetation that's over here. Like they had little illustrations for everything. That was my idea for my map that I'm having be created. Like I'm not doing the art or anything, I have someone else doing that, but I've got some ideas, and we are like making a huge map. It's like gonna be bigger than this one too, and it's gonna be a bit different. It's like 4 rings right next to each other, not like 3 rings like this one, like inside of each other. I'll just have to show it. I can't really explain it.
this one has a lot more lore, and it involves a specific adventurer and explorer who has mapped out a lot of this, and I'll get into his story when I get into part 3. So, sorry. Across the sea from this are the lands of Alacaringa and the Maria Teresa Reef. Now, Alacaringa is called the Dreamlands. There's no lore about it. And the Maria Teresa Reef is, I assume, named after Maria Teresa. Below the reef is the legendary Jotunheimer from Norse mythology. It is a gigantic conglomeration of several peninsulas that stick out into the ocean. Jotunheimer is, of course, an old Norse word You might have heard about it if you follow any of that mythology or anything, but essentially it translates to the land of the divine. In the creation story of some believers of the Old Norse religions, Jotunheimer was one of the first worlds that was created. It's not a place that's meant to be traveled by people though, and it's reserved for titans and high deities and stuff. This entire upper left quadrant of Akupara is heavily Norse inspired, with mythology and history and lore that leads to it. Jotunheimer is a vast, expansive place. It's full of strange entities from Norse mythology.
That's where Loki's from, right?
I'll be explaining Asgard in the next video where I explain the entire wastes and the ring, because it's connected to it. The last two land masses for this video, finally at the end here, is Pays Dual and Amazonia. Now, Pays Dual is actually the bridge between land and sea, is what it's called. But that name is actually a Creole name from real life that means strange land. It's a direct Creole translation. And that's true of...
What is Creole? Can somebody in the chat tell me? Oh wait, I only have one viewer. I don't know if that's me, because I have Twitch up, but my one viewer could comment and tell me what does Creole mean? Where is that from?
Of Pays Dual.
Haiti?
Well, it is very strange because it's said that the beings that would live in the sea live on land, and the land creatures live in the sea. So here in these islands, fish, whales and sharks and krakens, they all walk on land, but mammals and trees and everything else, they live in the water here. Mammals have gills and fish have lungs. It is a strange land, just like the name suggests. And finally, we have the island of Amazonia, which is just off the coast.
I would go there.
Of Asgard. If you've heard of the Amazonian legends from real life, this place is just like that. Gigantic trees, huge birds, large people, giants, wizards, and that kind of thing. They live here, and they kind of feast off of the magic from Asgard. But little and less is written about it in the annals of history. But as you can see by this video, Akupara is much crazier and much more esoteric, much more enlightened, you could say, than Atlas and definitely Earth. There are literal gods and deities that roam here, and lore that just goes absolutely hard, bro. Like Polybius being the Psychonauts oasis. It's an island that you just go to trip on. That's crazy. Or Lemuria, which is this ancient land that was said to exist that sunk through the ocean, ended up here at Akupara. Such a cool place. But with that, I've explored every single landmass in the expanses of Akupara, and all the lore, the entities, and the known history that we have about them. Now, as always, this lore system is being constantly built, so this video might be obsolete in a few years, because, there wasn't actual official lore about some of these things. But I was able to get some lore from Italian PNC on YouTube.
This guy just makes up stuff. That's what I heard. He just makes, like, his own lore ideas based on the map. So I don't know if, like, this video is entirely correct from what the actual creators made, but the creators have a Reddit page and they have a Wikipedia page where they wrote a bunch about this, and I didn't barely read anything about it, and I don't think they even have that much up. I think they just mostly drew everything. The most that they have is what they have on the map.
Go check his channel out. And I was also able to get some lore from the Beyond the Ice Wall Discord and the people over there.
Yep, I'm banned from that Discord.